She laughed when I dropped my pill bottle on the floor. The sound was sharp, quick, and it cut right through the morning calm. I'm Ruth, 58, and I thought family meant safety. For a long time, I believed kindness was something you could teach by example. But that morning, I realized how thin that belief really was. The kitchen was warm, filled with the faint hiss of the kettle. My hands shook as I bent to pick up the pills. They scattered like tiny pearls across the tile. I heard her chuckle again, soft, careless. Megan, my daughter-in-law. She was supposed to drive me to the clinic. "Don't worry," she said, brushing her perfect hair from her face. "They'll still see you even if you take forever." I forced a smile. "You don't have to wait if you're in a hurry." "I'm fine," she replied, but the smirk stayed. We drove in silence, the hum of the car louder than our breathing. At the clinic, the nurse greeted us. Megan leaned close and whispered, "Maybe they'll give you one of those scooters. Make life easier." I pretended not to hear. The nurse looked up, eyebrows tightening, but said nothing. Her silence told me she'd heard too. I focused on the sound of the printer spitting out my prescription slip, a small rhythm to drown the sting in my chest. While waiting, I glanced at Megan scrolling on her phone, smiling at whatever conversation she preferred over mine. It wasn't the first time she'd joked about my pain, but it was the first time it landed like a bruise I could measure. The doctor called my name, but she stayed seated, pretending not to notice. I hobbled toward the door, feeling the uneven weight in my knees. Each step felt heavier because of her eyes on my back. Inside, the doctor asked routine questions. He was kind. Still, when I walked out again, Megan's laughter met me like a slap. "You're done already? They didn't prescribe youth?" she said. The nurse flinched. I caught her reflection in the glass partition. Disapproval flickered across her face before she turned away. The drive home was wordless. I stared out the window, watching bare trees slide past. Every branch looked like it was reaching for something it couldn't quite touch. At home, the air was gentler. I made tea. The kettle whistled, a familiar comfort. Steam rose and blurred the edges of the kitchen light. The smell of chamomile filled the room, soft and steady. I tried to let it settle me, but the morning kept replaying in my mind, the sound of pills hitting tile, the nurse's silence, Megan's grin. When my son came home later, I almost told him, but he looked tired, distracted. I swallowed the words and asked instead, "How was work?" He smiled and kissed my forehead. I told myself keeping quiet was kindness. After dinner, I washed the same teacup I always used, white porcelain, chipped on one edge. My hands trembled slightly, but not from pain this time. Something new had begun to move inside me. I took my notebook from the drawer and opened it to a fresh page. The paper smelled faintly of dust. I wrote down everything: time, place, every word she said. I didn't know why yet, only that it mattered. Maybe I needed proof for myself, to remind me I wasn't imagining cruelty disguised as humor. As I wrote, the house settled around me, creaking in familiar rhythm. It had been my refuge for 22 years. Tonight, it felt like a witness. When I closed the notebook, the clock struck 9. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, but steadier. I whispered to the empty room, "No one deserves to be laughed at for pain." The sentence sounded small, but it had weight. That night, I placed the notebook beside my teacup on the counter. The page glowed faintly under the kitchen light. I stared at her name written at the top, the ink still fresh, the letters precise. That night, I wrote her name first. She called me slow again, but not to my face. I heard her voice drift through the corridor, low but sharp enough to cut through the hum of the library printer. The air smelled of old paper and lemon polish, that familiar blend that usually calmed me. Today, it turned thick in my throat. She thought I couldn't hear. She always did. "She uses the illness as an excuse," Megan said. Her tone was light, almost playful, the way people sound when they believe their cruelty is wit. I froze beside the shelf of returned books, gripping the edge until my knuckles went pale. My cane leaned against the cart, a silent witness to everything. Someone chuckled, a man I didn't recognize, and then footsteps faded down the hall. I waited until the printer stopped before I let myself breathe. The rhythm of it stopping felt like an ending, but not the kind I wanted. Lyle, my coworker, came by an hour later. He was kind, steady, never one for gossip. "I overheard something," he said quietly. "I think it was about you." "I figured as much. It wasn't kind." "I know." He hesitated, as if asking permission to care. Then he nodded, respecting my silence. I appreciated that more than pity. At closing, I filed away the new book deliveries, noting the dates with careful precision. 2 shipments, 15 titles, all logged in ink, order and evidence, both comforts in their own way. My cane tapped softly against the linoleum as I moved through the aisles. The sound echoed faintly, like a reminder of my own persistence. When I reached for the light switch, I saw the faint reflection of myself in the glass, tired, shoulders bent, but still upright. "You're fine," I whispered. Saying it aloud made it truer than feeling it. That night, I couldn't shake her words. They clung to me as I sorted through my drawer of appointment cards. Each slip of paper felt heavier than it should. I found one from last month, signed neatly by the doctor, the proof that my pain wasn't imagination. I placed it inside a folder labeled Health. Then, almost without thinking, I added a new sheet, an empty one titled Megan. I started collecting messages, every text she sent about errands, prescriptions, even jokes that cut too close. It wasn't revenge, it was preservation. Proof lived in small, ordinary details, and I was learning to hold on to them. When my son came by later that week, I mentioned I might move closer to town. "It's quieter there," I said. He smiled faintly, distracted. "You'd miss the garden." "I'd get used to it," he shrugged. "Don't let Megan bother you. She jokes too much." Jokes. The word landed like a stone. I wondered how many times she had hidden behind it. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, steady but hollow. After he left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. Outside, the street lamp buzzed, throwing soft light across the glass. The glow made the dust in the air look like it was moving, alive, restless. Maybe that's what truth was, particles floating, waiting to be noticed. The next morning, I found a folded note on my desk. It was from Lyle. "If you ever need someone to back you up," it read, "I'll be there." I tucked it into the same folder with the doctor's card. It felt like the start of something. Small, invisible, but real. At work that afternoon, Megan came by again. She stayed near the front desk, chatting with one of the assistants. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. Her laugh carried across the room, bright and careless. 3 patrons looked up, startled by the sound. One even frowned, unsure why laughter felt wrong in a library. I stood behind the stacks, unseen, but aware of every syllable. "Still moving slow, huh?" she said when she caught sight of me. Her smile was sugar-coated poison. "Still talking too much?" I replied, my voice calm, almost kind. The words slipped out before I planned them. For a moment she blinked, caught off guard. Then she turned away, pretending she hadn't heard. I returned to shelving, my hands steadier than before. The whisper of book spines sliding into place filled the air. Quiet work, clean work, mine alone. By closing time, the scent of dust had softened again. The day had reset, but I hadn't. I was changing, even if only by inches. When I locked the library door, I paused to glance back through the glass. Rows of books stood in silent order, unbothered by rumor or cruelty. I envied their stillness. I stepped into the cool evening, gripping my cane. The metal felt firm beneath my palm. Strength doesn't always roar, it often just stands its ground. Her laughter followed me into the stacks. He looked up and said, "Your family?" It was the way he said it, half surprise, half something gentler that made me hesitate before answering. The fluorescent light hummed softly above us, casting a clean white glow over his desk. I nodded, trying not to sound wary. "Yes, my son's wife is Megan." His pen stopped mid-note. "Megan." He repeated it like a word he hadn't used in years. "She's my cousin. We haven't spoken in a long time." The air in the small clinic room shifted. I felt the pulse in my wrist quicken. "Small world," I said. He smiled faintly, but there was weight behind it. "It can be," he replied. He flipped through my chart, slower now, reading each line as if it meant something more. "How long have you had these flare-ups?" "Since winter," I said. "Mostly in the mornings. The stiffness doesn't fade until after breakfast." He wrote it all down carefully, no hint of doubt in his tone. I noticed that, how he listened without the polite indifference most doctors carried. His desk lamp caught the edge of his glasses, throwing a brief glare across the page. That light made the scene feel like a quiet revelation. When the appointment ended, he handed me the printed slip. "We'll adjust your medication slightly," he said, then paused. "And if you ever feel like you're not being heard at home, my office door is open." I tucked the paper into my folder and thanked him. Outside, the hallway felt colder, though maybe it was just the rush of knowing something had changed. On the drive home, Megan was silent for most of the way. Then, casually, she asked, "Did you like your new doctor?" I did, very attentive. "Male or female?" "Male." She glanced over, expression unreadable. "What's his name?" "Dr. Harris." Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She almost missed the next turn. "Harris? You mean—" "Yes," I said quietly. "Your cousin, apparently." Her face drained of color, just a shade, but enough for me to notice. "I didn't know he worked there," she muttered. I didn't respond. The silence stretched between us, full of things neither of us dared say. At home, she followed me into the kitchen, pretending to be casual. "So, what did he say about you?" "That I'm managing fine," I said. I placed my teacup on the counter, steadying my voice. "He's thorough, said to keep track of my symptoms." She nodded, eyes darting toward the folder under my arm. "You're not talking about me, are you?" I looked at her directly. "Should I be?" She gave a forced laugh. "Don't be dramatic. I just don't want family gossip." "Neither do I." I filled the kettle and turned on the stove. The whistle of the burner filled the pause between us. The air smelled faintly metallic, like tension given shape. Later, when she left the room, I sat at the table with my tea and opened the folder. Inside, the slip from Dr. Harris looked ordinary, black ink on white paper. But I knew it meant more. Proof of care. Proof that someone with her name in common had seen me as real, not fragile or exaggerating. I stared at the handwriting, neat and deliberate. It felt like an anchor in a sea of doubt. Somewhere between those lines was the beginning of leverage, though I didn't yet know what form it would take. That night, Megan knocked on my door before bed. "Sorry if I seemed strange earlier," she said. "Family surprises me sometimes." "I understand," I answered. "Don't mention me to him, okay? It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" "Old stuff," she said quickly. "Nothing that matters." I nodded, pretending to accept it, but I could tell by the tremor in her voice that something from her past had been stirred. A debt, maybe. A memory she didn't want revived. When she left, I poured the rest of my tea into the sink and rinsed the cup slowly. The kitchen light flickered once before steadying, a small reminder of how fragile calm could be. I carried the folder to my room and set it on the nightstand. The weight of it was new, heavier than paper should be. Lying in bed, I thought about the way Dr. Harris had looked at me, not with pity, but recognition. Maybe he saw more than I realized. Maybe he knew something she didn't want known. As sleep began to pull at me, I realized that the balance between us had shifted ever so slightly. She had always laughed at me from a place of power, but tonight, for reasons she couldn't yet explain, she had gone quiet. For the first time, she looked afraid. She swore I was making things up to shame her. The words reached me through the hedge while I trimmed the dead stems by the gate. A breath of early autumn slid under my coat like a thin blade, the kind that makes your shoulders rise before you can stop them. Her voice carried in little bursts down Pine Lane, sweet with concern to anyone passing, sharp enough for me to bleed by inches. "Poor thing," she cooed to a neighbor. She exaggerates because it gets her attention. I set the shears down and leaned against the post until the chill left my skin. I would not run out there. I would not feed her performance. If they believed her, I could lose my place on this street, one quiet conversation at a time. Later that week at the mailbox, the red flag hung like a warning I had ignored. There was an envelope from the Homeowners Association with my name, printed too neatly. I opened it on the walk back to the door. The note did not accuse me outright. It suggested, advised, and pressed in those polite ways that still leave fingerprints. Please refrain from causing disturbances. Disturbances. I stood on the porch steps, looking at the words as if they might rearrange themselves into sense. By afternoon, I took the letter to Lyle at the library. "It's not a fine," I said, laying it on the desk between us. "But it isn't gentle." He read once, then again, slower. "This is vague on purpose," he said. "They're covering themselves." "I know. Do you want to answer it?" He looked up, weighing his next sentence. "It will put you on record." "I want the truth on record," I said. "If rumor gets paper, so does this." We drafted a reply behind the returns counter. He typed, I dictated. It began with simple facts. I kept to my routines. I asked for help only when necessary. I had documentation regarding mobility that explained the slower pace on the sidewalk and the brief rests at the fence. "Attach what you can," he said. I placed a copy of the doctor's note by his elbow. He reached for it, then paused. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "Once the board has this, you can't pretend none of this happened." "I don't want to pretend," I said. "I want to stop being the story she tells." We printed the letter and slid it into a clean envelope. I made 2 copies and kept one in my folder at home, the same folder where I had started keeping the messages that sounded like jokes and landed like bruises. At 7 that evening, I walked the envelope to the blue box by the post office and watched it disappear. I told myself the sound of it dropping inside was an answer, even if it felt like a question I had asked too late. The next morning, I took clippings to the bin by the curb. She was there, waiting with a trash bag and a smile so bright it hurt to stand near. "You've been busy," she said. "Just tidying." "I heard there was a letter," she added casually. "Neighborhood matters can be delicate." "They can," I said. "Gossip is even more delicate." She tilted her head. "Is that a threat?" "No." I kept my voice low. "It's a boundary." Her smile thinned. "Don't make this harder." "Then stop making it cruel." For a moment she studied me, like I was a mess she could still rearrange. Then she stepped closer, too close. The bag rustled in her hand. "People talk," she whispered. "I can't help that. People repeat what they're fed." She laughed once, soft and satisfied. "You're dramatic." "Stop it," I said. "Or what?" I let the space between us answer. She pulled back, flustered, then spun toward the neighbor who'd just come out to sweep his steps. "Morning," she sang. "Some of us are very sensitive lately." I watched the neighbor's face fold into concern built from thin air. I was done donating my story to her stage. I called Lyle from the porch. "I mailed it," I said. "Good," he answered. I could hear pages turning on his end. "Keep copies. If they respond, bring it to me. We'll file everything together." "Thank you." "Listen," he added, with that careful note he used when caution mattered. "She might push back harder. She already has. Then don't open the door when she knocks." I promised I wouldn't. That promise felt like laying a plank across a narrow gap, not a bridge to peace, but a way to cross without falling. That night I stood by the front window and watched Pine Lane settle into itself. Porch talk dwindled. Paper lanterns blinked on in a pattern I knew by heart. I held the association letter in one hand and the stamped reply in the other, as if balance could be arranged by weight. This would not fix anything today. It would, however, tell a different version of me than the one she broadcasted. Near 11, my phone lit with a message from an unknown number. Let's keep family matters within family. No name, just the tone I recognized, the kind that leaves you arguing with the air. I slid the message into the folder as I turned off the hallway lamp. The porch light flickered as if it heard her lie. Every favor had a price, and I began to count. Downtown branch, Tuesday morning. She had told the manager she handled my bills to keep things simple. I brought my own bag and stood in a short line, rehearsing calm. The teller with silver hair waved me over and asked how she could help. I asked for a printout of recent activity from the joint account, just the last month. The paper slid warm from the machine, slightly rough at the edges. The faint grain scratched my fingertips and kept me steady. "I'm reviewing a few transactions," I said. "No rush." "Take your time here," she said. "I'll print the details." The sheet arrived with neat columns. 4 transactions appeared where my memory offered none. I had let her handle autopay, grocery deliveries, even small repairs. "Would you like me to highlight the questionable items?" the teller asked. "Yes, please." She drew tidy lines with a yellow pen and let me read without hurry. She did not ask whether I understood numbers. She did not talk to me like a child. 4 transactions, $600, $1,200, $300, and $150. Total, $2,250. I stared until the digits lost their shape. My hand stayed still on the counter. "These weren't me," I said. "They look like transfers to an external card," she said. "Same payee signature each time." Of course they did. "I need to limit access." "We can set a temporary hold and open a separate account you control," she said. "No one else will be able to see or move funds unless you authorize it." "What will this look like on the records?" "It will show a customer-requested change," she said. Then she paused. "Is there any risk to your safety if we proceed?" "No," I said. "There is risk if we don't. If I stayed passive, I could lose both my savings and my independence." She nodded and slid a small form toward me. "Initial here, here, and here. I'll add a note that you requested private statements at the branch only." I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should. She assembled a slim folder and labeled it in clean block letters. "Keep this somewhere only you can reach," she said. "Would you like a new card today?" "Yes. We can rush it. Pick up in 2 days or mail." "Pick up," I said. I needed the act of walking in, asking for it, leaving with something that was mine. A few minutes later, she returned with a separate envelope containing the printouts and a simple guide on how to monitor activity. "If someone calls claiming to be from the bank," she said, "hang up and dial the number printed on your statement. Don't engage." "I won't," I said. "Thank you." She hesitated, then gave a small pushback. "You can reverse some things," she said, "but not all. Be ready to explain calmly. People get defensive about money." "I understand." "Good." Her voice softened. "You're doing the right thing." On the way out, I sat on the bench by the glass doors. I folded the envelope and placed it in my bag. I counted the steps from the bench to the curb, steady, deliberate, so that fear had to fall in behind me instead of walking ahead. At home, I spread the papers on the kitchen table and smoothed them with my palm. I took a page from my folder labeled Health and added a new divider. Money. I wrote today's date in script. One change can turn a tide if you hold it. Before dinner, I called the teller's direct extension to confirm the hold. We spoke for 20 minutes, going step by step until nothing wobbled. She ended with, "We will call you if you ask us to." I sat with tea I barely drank and watched the evening gather outside the window. The porch stayed quiet, like the house was holding its breath. I wanted to tell him everything and nothing at once. I settled on silence and on action. Not all wars are loud. Some are lists and signatures, a line drawn where no one sees the hand that drew it. The next withdrawal would meet silence. My spare house key vanished from the hook. At first, I thought I'd misplaced it. I checked the bowl by the door, the drawer with the loose batteries, even the pocket of the coat I hadn't worn in weeks. Nothing. The air in the hallway carried a trace of her perfume. faint, floral, too deliberate to be memory. I froze, staring at the hook. Something wasn't right. By the afternoon, the drawers in the bedroom looked touched, not ransacked, but rearranged. My medication organizer sat open, 2 pills short. I counted twice just to be sure. The rhythm of the numbers was the only steady thing left in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the plastic case in both hands, feeling the edge press into my palm. When I mentioned it to her later that day, she blinked too fast. "Why would I need your key?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe you borrowed it." "That's ridiculous." "Then where did it go?" She shrugged. "You forget things. It's normal." "No, it isn't." Her voice softened, falsely tender. "You've been under stress. Don't make problems where there aren't any." The words were gentle enough to sound like care, but every syllable rewrote the truth. She was rearranging me the way she'd rearranged my drawers, just enough to make me doubt what I knew. I didn't argue further. I went to the precinct the next morning. The station smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. A young officer at the desk looked up from his screen. "What's missing?" "Just a house key," I said, "and maybe a sense of safety." He half smiled, then realized I wasn't joking. "Do you suspect someone?" "Someone who has reason." He wrote a few notes, asked for my address, then handed me a small card. "We'll log it," he said. "If anything else happens, call us right away." As I left, the morning air felt sharper than usual. I clutched the card so tightly it creased. Proof wasn't always about catching someone. It was about refusing to vanish from the record. That evening, she arrived unannounced. "You went to the police?" she asked, voice flat. "I reported a missing key." "You really think I'd sneak into your house?" "I think you'd laugh if I said yes." Her jaw tightened. "You're becoming paranoid." "Or careful." "People talk when they see this kind of behavior." Her words lingered long after she left, curling into the corners of the room. I sat at the table writing down everything she'd said. Date, time, tone. I filed it in the folder marked Home. Later, I called Lyle. He answered on the second ring. "You did the right thing," he said after hearing the story. "Change the locks. Today." "Won't that look like I'm overreacting?" "It'll look like you learned." I went to the hardware store before it closed. The clerk helped me pick out a new deadbolt, explaining how to fit it without drilling new holes. I thanked him and carried the box like something sacred. Back home, I worked slowly, careful with each screw. My hands ached halfway through, but I didn't stop. When the last piece clicked into place, I tested the handle twice. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was small, but absolute. I stood in the doorway, breathing quietly. The night outside was still, and for a moment, I let myself believe safety could be rebuilt one turn at a time. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps, not loud, but deliberate. I stayed frozen, staring at the door. Whoever it was didn't call out. The pause stretched long enough to make the house creak. When it finally stopped, I backed away, locking the bolt again, even though it was already locked. I checked the window latches, every one of them. The street light outside flickered once, then steadied. I closed the curtains and sat on the couch, listening for movement. No one came again that night. But as I reached for the new key on my table, I realized something. If she'd had the first one, she probably had another. Maybe from before, maybe one I didn't even remember giving. She had her own copy somewhere. A stranger called to check on my medication use. The voice was polite, rehearsed, too polished to be casual. "We're updating our patient records," the caller said. "Can you confirm how often you take your dosage?" Something in the tone made me sit up straighter. There was no background noise, no typing, just a hollow pause between each question. "Who is this again?" I asked. "I'm with the clinic's outreach department," she replied quickly. But she stumbled over the clinic's name, turning it into a blur. I kept my answers brief and vague until she hung up. The silence afterward felt thick, like the house itself was listening. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. I wrote down the time, 2:17 p.m., and the number she'd called from. I could already feel that chill of being watched without proof. The next morning, I phoned the clinic myself. "We don't have anyone by that name," the receptionist said after checking twice, "and we never call patients to ask about medication frequency." "So someone pretended to be from you," I said. "I'm afraid so. If you'd like, I can file a note in your chart." "Yes," I said. "Please do that." When I hung up, my hands trembled slightly. It wasn't just the intrusion. It was the precision of it. They knew what question would sound official enough to disarm me. I checked my phone log again, then copied the number into my notebook. The digits looked harmless in ink, but my gut told me otherwise. That afternoon, I told Lyle. He frowned. "You think it's her?" "She's the only one who'd benefit," I said. "First the missing key, now this." "You should report it," he said. "Start a paper trail." "I already have one." I called the medical board's office, where an older clerk listened carefully. "That's impersonation," she said. "We'll send a request to verify all outbound calls linked to your file." Her voice carried that clipped steadiness of someone used to bureaucracy. "If anything surfaces, we'll notify the clinic directly." "Thank you," I said. But even as I hung up, I knew Megan wouldn't stop. The difference now was that I had allies who wrote things down. 2 days later, she called me herself. "You've been making calls again?" "I had to," I said evenly. "You're making this look worse than it is." "Worse for who?" She sighed, all wounded dignity. "You keep misunderstanding everything I said, and you keep making that sound like compassion." "People will think you're not well," she warned. "Be careful what you say." It was a clean strike, using public doubt as a weapon. By evening, I saw her new posts online. A short status about family aging and paranoia. A few hearts, a few sympathetic comments. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. The picture she used showed my porch light in the background. That night, I sat at my desk, scrolling through her page, every sentence calculated to humiliate. The anger came slow, layered under exhaustion. Then I remembered what the clerk said. Everything leaves a record. I screenshotted the posts, printed the call log, and stapled them together. Proof didn't need noise. It needed order. I drafted a short letter to Dr. Harris. "I believe someone has been impersonating your staff to gather personal information about me. I have attached the call record and relevant documentation. Please confirm whether the board has been notified. Respectfully." Before sealing it, I added one last line. "The harassment appears to be personal." The envelope sat on my table, pale against the dark wood. I could smell the faint paper dust as I pressed it closed. By the time I walked it to the mailbox, the sky had turned the color of steel. The next morning, Lyle called. "Did you send it?" "I did." "Good. Keep copies." "I always do." He hesitated. "You realize she's escalating, right?" "I do," I said. "But she's finally leaving fingerprints." When I looked again at the call record, the pattern was obvious. Every incident followed the same rhythm: mockery, denial, intrusion. She wanted to control the story before I could prove it, but proof once gathered doesn't vanish. It multiplies. Her lies were now on record. He replied, short but devastatingly clear. The letter came in a plain envelope with the clinic's logo pressed faintly on the corner. The paper was smooth, the ink a deep blue that caught the edge of the lamplight. I sat at the table for a long time before opening it. I already knew what it meant, but I needed to see it written. Official, undeniable. It read, "After review, the welfare report regarding your medication and conduct has been found baseless. Your care record remains intact. No further action will be taken." I let out a sound I didn't recognize, something between a laugh and a sob. Months of tension collapsed into that one paragraph. I folded the letter carefully, twice, and pressed my palm over the crease to steady my breathing. When I looked up, the lamp cast a narrow circle across the table, warm and patient. The rest of the room fell away. Proof had shape now, not rumor. I called Lyle first. "It's official," I said. "The report was false." He exhaled audibly. That's the turn you needed. Make copies. I will. Keep one outside the house, he added, just in case. He didn't have to explain why. I slid the letter into a plastic sleeve, then into my folder, the one marked quietly with my handwriting. Each page inside it was a small act of defiance. Later that evening, my son stopped by. He didn't sit down. "You got mail from the clinic?" he asked. "I did. They cleared me completely." He frowned. "She said it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't. They confirmed the report was false." "She wouldn't do that," he muttered, looking at the floor. "She did." "She wouldn't risk her name like that." "She already has." His silence stretched out like a verdict. "You'd rather think I'm lying?" I asked. He rubbed his forehead. "I just don't want to be in the middle." "You already are." He stepped back, frustration etched across his face. "Mom, you have to let it go before it eats you up." I wanted to tell him it already had. Instead, I said quietly, "The truth doesn't eat. It waits." He didn't answer. The front door closed with a sound I'll never forget. Not angry, not gentle, just final. I sat at the table again, the letter in front of me. My tea had gone cold. The lamp hummed faintly. Outside, the street was still. I turned the paper over, reading the signature at the bottom. It wasn't long, but it carried authority, enough to undo every whisper she'd built. I made 3 copies that night. One went to my lawyer, one to the board, and one I sealed in a separate envelope labeled simply Truth. I placed it in the same drawer where I kept my birth certificate and will. Not for drama, just order. When I told Lyle about my son's reaction, he hesitated. "People protect the stories they need," he said, "even if it means turning away from evidence." "I know," I said, "but now the story isn't hers anymore." "That's power," he said, quiet but solid. I glanced toward the window. The lamplight reached only so far before fading into shadow. I thought of the months of humiliation, of the jokes, of the doubt that clung to me even in sleep. And now, one sheet of paper had shifted everything. Not enough to heal it, but enough to expose the wound. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. There's a difference. Before bed, I wrote a line in my notebook. "They can question my voice, but not the record." The words looked small, but I knew they mattered. In the days that followed, the air around the house changed. She stopped calling. The post disappeared. My son texted short messages, neutral, polite. It was the kind of calm that feels temporary, like the pause between storms. But I had proof now, real proof. That night, I sat at the table one last time. The folder opened beside me. The lamp glowed softly, catching the edge of the sealed envelope. I ran my fingers over it, steady and deliberate. I sealed the envelope marked Truth. The bank called. My cards were suddenly frozen. The voice on the phone was polite, professional, detached. "Ma'am, we've had to suspend all joint activity pending an internal review." "For what reason?" I asked, already knowing. "A report of potential fraudulent use was filed. We can't specify by whom." The air around me thinned. The teacup in my hand clattered softly as I set it down. I asked when this had happened. "Yesterday morning," she said. "We sent an email notice." "I didn't see one." "It may have gone to your secondary inbox." I hung up and stared at the quiet kitchen. It wasn't about money. It was about control. She'd struck where she thought I'd feel helpless. 2 hours later, I stood at the downtown branch, the marble floor cold beneath my shoes. The air conditioning cut straight through my sweater. Behind the counter, a young teller looked up as I slid my ID and debit card forward. "I need to understand why my accounts are frozen," I said. She glanced at the screen, frowned, then called over a manager. He arrived with the calm efficiency of someone trained to handle panic. "There's a contested report," he said. "It claims you misused a shared account. We've locked both profiles while we verify ownership. Can you see who made the report?" He nodded slowly. "I can, but I'm not supposed to say." I met his eyes. "You don't have to. I already know." He hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. We've initiated a review. It'll take about 3 business days. Meanwhile, we can provide a temporary access card tied only to your name." "Please do," I said. He led me to a side desk where the printer hummed and spat out forms. My fingers felt stiff, and the chill of the room deepened as I signed each page. The cold wasn't from the temperature, it was from the understanding that someone I had once trusted wanted to strip me of independence, digit by digit. While waiting for the new card, I called Lyle. "She froze the accounts," I said. He didn't sound surprised. "It was coming, but she overplayed her hand. You'll have proof once the review clears. They said it'll take 3 days." "Good. That's 3 days she's locked out too." For the first time, I let that sink in. "You're right," I said. "Hold on to that. She just turned this into documentation you didn't have to chase." When I returned to the counter, the manager handed me a temporary card and a printed statement. "This record shows the contested access," he said. "You'll see which user triggered the dispute. Keep it safe." I scanned the page. 2 transactions stood out, $300 and $450, both from the shared account. Dates aligned with the week she'd told me she was handling utility payments. "Those were hers," I said quietly. "We'll verify that," he said, "and restore your full access as soon as possible." I thanked him and stepped outside. The city air felt damp against my skin. I sat on a bench outside the branch and let the noise of traffic wash over me. The numbness in my fingers had traveled to my chest. This was no longer whispers or rumors. It was an official record, a conflict stamped and logged. Proof now lived in the system, not just in my folder. When I reached home, I placed the bank statement beside the doctor's letter and the printed screenshots from weeks before. My folder had grown thick enough to make the drawer stick when I slid it shut. An hour later, Lyle called again. "She just phoned the branch manager," he said. "Tried to argue that the review was unnecessary." "How do you know?" "I know someone who works there. They said she was furious when they told her the freeze applies to both parties." I let out a breath that felt like the first in hours. "Then that's my formal notice," I said. "It is. She can't move a dollar without your consent now." I looked around my quiet house. For months, silence had felt like defeat. Tonight, it sounded like evidence. I made tea, steadying my hands around the mug's warmth. Through the window, the evening dimmed to gray. The reflection in the glass didn't look weak anymore, just tired and determined. Control isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a signed paper, a frozen account, a pause that belongs only to you. Her access was gone, but her anger wasn't. They called my name first, under the bright lights. The meeting hall smelled faintly of dust and coffee, the kind of scent that clings to public buildings where truth is debated but rarely spoken outright. Rows of folding chairs faced the council's long desk. The crowd murmured as I stepped forward. My knees felt unsteady, but my voice was steady. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk said. I did. The microphone crackled. The sound bounced off the wooden panels and carried farther than I expected. The chairperson nodded. "You may proceed." I unfolded the paper in my hand. Every word had been rewritten, trimmed, tested aloud until it could stand without shaking. "Over the past 6 months," I began, "my accounts were accessed without consent. False welfare reports were filed in my name. Funds were moved under the pretense of assistance." The room shifted. People leaned in. Someone coughed. "I am not here for sympathy," I continued. "I am here for acknowledgement." A woman in the second row whispered to her neighbor. I saw heads turn toward Megan, seated 2 chairs behind me. Her expression was all composure, every line of her posture rehearsed. When I raised the doctor's letter, the paper caught the light like a small mirror. "This is a written statement from Dr. Harris," I said. "It confirms that the welfare report was false and that my medical record remains unaltered." His exact words, "No evidence of impairment or neglect." The audience reacted. A few audible gasps, then the scrape of chairs as someone stood up. The council members exchanged glances. Megan sprang to her feet. "That's a lie," she shouted. "She's confused. The moderator banged the gavel. "You'll have your turn." "She doesn't know what she's saying," Megan pushed on. "She's unwell." The moderator's voice rose. "Sit down or be removed." Her outburst did what my statement couldn't. It revealed her. The calm veneer cracked just enough for the room to see who had been holding the strings. I waited for silence, then said softly, "You can question my tone. You can't question the paperwork." The council chair cleared his throat. "Do you have supporting documents beyond the letter?" "Yes," I said. "Bank records confirming unauthorized withdrawals, $300 and $450, from a shared account, both executed during a period when my card was in the branch manager's custody." I handed the copies to the clerk, who passed them up the line. As they read, the murmurs rose again. One man in the back whispered, "That's theft." Another, louder, said, "It's exploitation." The chair tapped his pen. "We'll recess for review," he said, but the decision was already forming in the room. I could feel it, relief and anger colliding in equal measure. Megan's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She shook her head, her face tightening as the flash of a camera caught her from the side. When the chair returned, his tone had changed. "This council refers the matter to Protective Services for formal investigation under Elder Financial Abuse Statute, effective immediately." The sentence was plain, but the effect was seismic. A murmur rippled through the audience, some shocked, some satisfied. I heard someone call out, "About time!" Another voice said, "She's brave to stand up." I wasn't sure who they meant, me or any woman who'd ever been dismissed with a polite smile and a closed door. The moderator handed me a copy of the written notice. It read, in clean type, "Immediate investigation. Elder financial abuse suspected." I folded it and placed it inside my notebook, beside every other proof I had guarded in silence. When I turned to leave, Megan's eyes met mine. They were blank now, unreadable, the look of someone realizing that public opinion moves faster than private excuses. Outside, the evening air was cool and steady. Reporters waited near the steps, their flashbulbs flickering like small explosions of light. I didn't speak to them. I didn't need to. Her face went blank as flashbulbs clicked. The envelope arrived, thick and final. It lay on the doormat like a verdict. The paper felt heavier than it should, smooth but firm under my fingers, as if the weight of every lie was pressed inside. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down before opening it. The air was still, like the house itself was holding its breath. Inside was the official notice from Protective Services. The words were plain but absolute. "Case under formal review. Subject found responsible for misuse of funds. Repayment required, $2,250. All management privileges suspended." For a moment, I couldn't move. The number looked small on paper, but enormous in meaning. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement. I traced the raised print with my fingertip and felt that strange texture of truth, rough in its own way. I called Lyle. "It's done," I said. "You got it?" "I did. They've opened the case. She's being ordered to repay the full amount." He let out a low whistle. "You did it the right way. Quiet, steady. That's the only way that lasts," I said. He paused. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I said, though the word didn't fit. "It's justice, but it's cold." That night, Megan didn't show up at the weekly town gathering. People noticed. Someone told me she'd skipped work at the community center. Another said she'd been seen driving out of town, face hidden behind sunglasses. The silence that followed wasn't pity, it was recognition. The next morning, my son stopped by. He stood in the doorway longer than usual, holding a grocery bag. "You got the letter?" "Yes." He nodded, eyes darting away. "She told me it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't." "I guess not," he murmured. "They said she'll have to pay it back." "She will." He looked down. "I didn't think it would go this far." "It went exactly as far as it had to," I said quietly. He set the groceries on the counter and lingered. "I just hope you're not happy about it." "I'm not," I said, "but I'm not sorry either." He didn't stay long. When the door closed behind him, the quiet came back, softer this time. I made tea, set the kettle aside, and reached for my folder. Every document was in order now. The doctor's letter, the bank review, the council referral, and this final notice. The stack had grown thick enough that it barely fit the clasp. I slipped the new paper in, aligning the edges until it sat flush against the rest. I thought of the first note I'd written months ago, the scribbled record of missing funds, the shaky handwriting born of disbelief. It was still there at the bottom, fragile and yellowing slightly. From that scrap to this official order, the distance felt immeasurable. Lyle called again that evening. "You did what most people can't," he said. "You made the system listen." I just told the truth loud enough for paper to hear. That's rarer than you think. We hung up, and I sat watching the street through the thin curtain. The sun had dipped low, streaking pale light across the wall. I could almost hear the clock ticking in the next room, the rhythm calm, unhurried. Justice isn't warm. It doesn't comfort. It just corrects the record. The world keeps turning, but now it carries a mark, one that says I was not invisible. I placed my folder back in the drawer beside my cane. The two things that had steadied me most. One for walking, one for standing up. Justice, though cold, had handwriting. She knocked again, but this time she waited. I saw her shadow move through the glass panel near the door, slow and uncertain. For a moment, I thought of pretending not to hear. But silence had been my prison long enough. I opened the door just enough for air and memory to pass between us. Her perfume reached me first, the same one she'd worn when she stood in the bank months ago, insisting she was helping me. It carried a sweetness that used to mean care, now only intrusion. "I didn't mean for it to go so far," she said. Her voice trembled in a way that almost sounded rehearsed. I looked at her, not angry anymore, just emptied of surprise. "That's exactly how far cruelty goes," I said. Her eyes filled instantly, but the tears seemed to serve her, not me. She pressed a hand to the frame, as if testing whether the old power still worked. I didn't move. "I thought I could fix it," she whispered. "You can't fix what you tried to erase." She shook her head, glancing toward the street. A police car idled there, an officer standing by the curb. He caught my eye and gave a small nod. The visit was logged, precautionary, nothing more. "I only came to say I'm sorry," she continued. "Then say it," I said. She blinked. "I just did." "Not for what you did to me, for what you did to yourself." That stopped her. For the first time, her face lost shape, the mask gone. I remembered the years when that same face had smiled across my kitchen table, pretending to care while counting what was mine. The silence between us stretched. The wind moved faintly through the hedges. I could hear the officer shifting his weight on the pavement, the sound grounding the moment in something real. "Please," she said, voice breaking. "I can't live with everyone knowing." "You managed when it was only me who knew." Her breath caught. "You don't understand. I lost everything." "So did I said. "But I didn't take it from someone else." She opened her mouth to reply, then closed it, again. The look she gave me wasn't hatred, it was recognition. The kind that comes when someone finally sees the shape of their own choices. "You'll never forgive me," she said quietly. "That's not what this door is for," I said. She stepped back. The space between us filled with the faint echo of her perfume. For a second, I thought she might ask to come in, to reclaim some small piece of dignity. But she didn't. The officer approached, his tone polite. "Everything all right here?" "Yes," I said. She was just leaving. Megan nodded without a word. He watched her walk down the path, her shoulders bent but not broken. When she reached the gate, she turned once, as if expecting a call, a gesture, a reprieve. None came. I closed the door slowly, the latch catching with a click that sounded final. My hand rested on the handle, steady this time. For months it had trembled. Now it didn't. I went to the kitchen and filled the kettle. The house was quiet except for the gentle boil and the faint hum of life returning to its rhythm. The same teacup waited on the counter, a small reminder of ordinary things that had survived all of this. Outside, the police car pulled away. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, then nothing. I poured the tea, steam rising in soft curls. The air carried a trace of her perfume still lingering in the hallway, faint but present. It would fade, like everything else she'd tried to claim. Her footsteps faded, but not the silence. At the pharmacy, they finally called me by my name. For months, it had been misfiled, attached to someone else's contact, someone who had tried to own what wasn't hers. Now the clerk looked up with an easy smile, said it clearly, and waited for me to nod. The sound of it, my own name spoken without hesitation, was enough to steady me. The air inside was cool and faintly sterile, the soft hum of refrigerators mixing with the quiet shuffle of paper bags. I noticed how even the smallest sounds fell into rhythm again. Normalcy doesn't arrive with fanfare, it walks in quietly like this. "We've updated your file," the pharmacist said. "All future notices go directly to you." I smiled. Good. That's how it should be. He printed the slip, tore it cleanly, and placed it on the counter. The faint click of the register followed. Simple, mechanical, reassuring. I slid my new card across, the one that only I could use now. "Charge it here," I said. He nodded, scanned it, and handed me the receipt. "Glad everything's sorted out." "Me too," I said. "It's been a long sort." He laughed lightly, not knowing the depth behind it, and moved on to the next customer. I stepped aside, folding the small receipt between my fingers. Its edges were sharp, but the paper felt almost warm from the printer's heat. Proof of ownership, in a way no court or counsel could ever provide. As I waited for my refill, a woman beside me whispered, "That pharmacist is kind, isn't he?" "Yes," I said. "He remembers names." It was a small thing, but after months of being spoken about rather than to, it mattered. Every routine had once been a battlefield. Bank lines, clinic calls, home visits. Each one now returned to simple order. When my name was called again, I turned without fear. "That's me," I said, and the words carried no weight of defense, no need for explanation. The pharmacist handed over the bag. "You're good for another month." Another month. That phrase used to fill me with dread, time measured by supervision, appointments, inspections. Now it sounded like freedom counted out in steady intervals. Outside, the afternoon had softened. A few cars idled at the light, and I walked carefully across the street, my cane tapping on the pavement in its familiar rhythm. The sound was my own, proof of movement, of steady ground reclaimed. I stopped at the corner bench to rest. The paper bag rustled softly in my lap. Across the street, the coffee shop Megan once loved stood empty. The sign faded. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet understanding that distance is its own mercy. My phone buzzed once. A message from my son. "Hope you're doing all right." I read it, smiled faintly, and placed the phone back in my bag. I'd answer later. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was not a duty. It was a choice, and I would make it on my time, when the words could come without bitterness. The pharmacist's words echoed faintly in my mind. "All future notices go directly to you." It wasn't just about a file. It was about every door, every account, every name I'd reclaimed. I reached home before dusk. The porch light had come on automatically, a small, familiar glow waiting to greet me. I hung my coat, set the medicine on the counter, and filled the kettle. The teacup waited in its usual spot beside the cane, patient, unchanged. When the water boiled, I poured it slowly, listening. The hum of the kettle, the faint clink of porcelain, even the quiet creak of the floorboards, all of it was mine again. For the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel haunted by anyone's voice, but mine. It was just living, breathing space. No witnesses, no records, no apologies left to chase. I took my tea to the window and watched the streetlights blink on one by one. The world outside kept its rhythm, but now I could hear it differently, no longer as noise, but as balance returning. Freedom hums in the small sounds. I poured the last of the tea and whispered, "I remember." It had been nearly a year since everything unraveled, and yet the memory felt close, like breath against glass. The morning light stretched across the table, soft and unhurried, turning the chipped rim of my old teacup into something almost graceful. At the community center, the air carried that quiet hum of early activity. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, someone laughed too loud in the next room. It was life happening, steady and unremarkable, which made it precious. I looked down at the volunteer form. The top line read, "Elder Support, Peer Mentor Application." For a second, my hand hesitated above the paper, unsure if signing it meant closing one chapter or beginning another. Then I wrote my name. The pen didn't shake this time. The letters came out clean and deliberate. A small thing, but it meant everything. The woman at the desk smiled. "You'll be great with the group," she said. "You've been through enough to understand." "I hope so," I replied. "That's why I'm here." She nodded and stapled my form to the stack. The motion was ordinary, yet it carried a finality that settled deep inside me. I wasn't there as a victim. I was there because I'd survived, and now I could help others see that survival isn't a finish line. It's a way of living forward. When the session started, a few faces turned toward me. Some looked wary, others tired. I knew those expressions. They were the same ones I'd worn months ago when I still believed silence was safety. "I'm new," I said quietly, "but I know what it's like when someone takes your trust and twists it into proof of your weakness. It's not the end. It just feels like one." No one interrupted. One woman wiped her eyes, another smiled faintly. A man at the back muttered, "Wish I'd heard that sooner." The group laughed softly, not in mockery, but relief. It was the kind of laughter that belongs to people who finally see the edge of the dark. Afterward, I stayed behind to help clear the tables. A young volunteer stacked papers near me. "You're staying for lunch?" she asked. "Maybe. Depends if they serve anything stronger than tea." She laughed, light and real. "We could work on that." Her voice reminded me of Lyle's calm encouragement, of the pharmacist's steady tone, of all the small kindnesses that had patched the world back together. Each one had been a quiet proof that not all systems break people. Some still hold. On the bulletin board near the exit hung the new schedule for the month. My name appeared beside a Tuesday slot. Peer Mentor, 10 Honquak a.m. I stood there for a moment, smiling at the ordinariness of it. No hearings, no investigations, no signatures of survival, just time given back to others. As I gathered my bag, a woman from the group approached. "You spoke plainly," she said. "Most don't." "I used to hide behind polite words," I told her, "but truth works better when you stop polishing it." She nodded, tears threatening again. "I'll remember that." I paused. That's all I ever wanted anyone to do. Outside, the light was bright enough to make me squint. The street smelled faintly of rain, even though the sky was clear. Life was still full of small contradictions like that, signs of change without warning. At home, I set the kettle on and reached for my old teacup, the one that had survived every chapter with me. Its handle was chipped, its glaze faded, but it still held warmth. When the water boiled, I poured slowly, watching the steam rise in calm ribbons. The letter I'd kept, the doctor's note, the bank report, the council ruling, they were all filed away now. Silent witnesses turned to record. I didn't need to look at them anymore. The proof had done its work. When I lifted the cup, I thought of the question someone had asked earlier. "How did you stay strong?" I'd smiled then, answering without thinking. "Because I wrote her name first." It had been true then, and it was true now. Not her name as the villain, but as the lesson. Her choices had carved the boundaries that saved me. I took a sip. The flavor was faint, familiar. I let it linger, letting the quiet fill the room instead of fear. Through the window, the morning light deepened to gold across the kitchen table. I watched it move, unbothered, across the same spot where so much pain had begun. The house no longer felt like a witness. It felt like a companion. The tea cooled, but my resolve stayed warm. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.